Okay, so let's go. So one thing I did want to make a clear point of, I'm going to be on time today. I'll just make sure that's one of the disciplines I've got to get going at more and more. Sometimes I can get into something I'm passionate about and go over, but I do want to make the time for the questions. One thing I did want to just make clear at the beginning of this, though, that healthy culture is something that you have to have in place before an event like COVID happens, or any other major market impact, or something that's really going to test the resiliency of your business. It's not something that is a quick fix. There is certain things that you can do quickly, but it isn't a quick fix. It's something that I think really requires a considered intent and some patience to really implement. Anyway, let's get into it. So the first thing I wanted to communicate is that we're going to be going through 4 zones, and we recognize, or we believe, that these 4 zones are interdependent, and they're a good way to describe any SME. And so if we've got an excellent outcome in each of these, and the interdependence between them is also looked after, then we're going to have a resilient business. Now, just I'm going to give you a reference, and you will get these slides after this webinar, and in it actually has a URL to www.organisationalresilience.gov.au. So there is actually a government site around organisational resilience, and that's where we were informed by these 4 zones. So just so that you know that in the public domain, there is some information about organisational resilience. The thing that we've done, though, is we've focused ours on SMEs and the very unique challenges and characteristics of an SME. So today we're going to focus on that area of healthy culture, and healthy culture is leadership, culture, and people. So that's the banner on what we're going to focus on today. So let's get into it. The first thing I wanted to get to is that this is fundamental to building a resilient business. And I learned the incredibly hard way. So I'm going to tell you a quick story. In 2006, from 2006 to 2008, we went from 40 people to 80 people. So we were hiring those people in Santiago, Calgary, Perth, by that stage, South Africa. So, and we were looking at Brazil. So anyway, it was a crazy time where we were growing with speed. And what we were doing is we were being very, very conscious about getting people with a certain capability in our business, but we were pretty unconscious to the idea of how values and character and the attributes of the people was such an important thing to look at. So what happened in this period? We had higher churn. So what we learned is that people churn reduces productivity. The churn of people makes the delivery of excellence to customers difficult, because people, especially when you're dealing with technology, and our product was a sophisticated product, it took us a long time to train people. So it would often take us between 3 and 6 months to train a geoscientist when they came into our business. So consequently, we started to work out that if we had failed a failed hire, it could cost us anywhere between $150,000 to $200,000. So we thought, okay, that's that problem. Then if you've got churn of people, that can often lead to churn of customers. Now, we did not have that problem because that was such a big motivating force for us to get that right. So the people that were there, we went and picked up the pieces. But what it did do is it created an enormous amount of stress on the system, our company. So the other thing we started to learn is that some people can be very, very financially focused, right? And very purely rational, right? And I don't think that that serves you well when it comes to saying, okay, I want to build a team of people that are going to collaborate and cooperate for a long period of time. I actually have to start thinking about being in service of the aspirations of those people as much as my own aspirations for the organization. So you'll hear me use the term alignment a lot today. And that is a major, major focus of building a healthy culture. So this concept, if you start to think about people's knowledge, and this is how I tried to communicate it to a financial rationalist. I said, if you have a balance sheet, right, and you have debits and credits, and you can debit and credit intellectual property, every time somebody who has developed their intellectual property within your business, right, leaves, you just got, you were building a credit and then you got a major debit. And I know that sounds, why are you trying to use a financial metaphor to discuss the importance of building healthy culture? Well, it's because there's many people that are financial rationalists, and the nuances of culture are not purely rational. You can't, because you're working on the assumption that people are purely rational. And let's understand that every person that comes into your business has a life, and they have different events in their life that are going to impact them and impact their capacity to be productive in your business. So if somebody gets ill, or, you know, their kid gets ill, or, you know, they have a marriage failure or whatever, these are events in their life. Now, if you can build a culture that actually recognizes those events, you know, you actually are leaning into being able to support good people that can deliver great value for a long period of time. So you're not doing it only because you like people. What you want to do is you want to have highly productive people over a long period of time, because the outcome of that is not only a resilient business, but a resilient business that can deliver on the purpose of the organization and the financial success of the organization. And that's what I want to reiterate that point, is that during this time, we had 16 years of continuous revenue growth. It's not like we were doing it only because we wanted to have high capability and high productivity, which I'm going to get to in a moment. The final thing I just want to share here on this particular point is that we sold the company in 2018. At that particular time, we had there were 6 organizational leaders, there was many team leaders, and then there was the organization of over 100 people. The average tenure of the leadership was 14 years. The average tenure of the team leaders was 9 years. And the whole company was 7.6 years. Now, in the resources industry, what I discovered is that that's quite unusual. Now, people could say, oh, does that mean that you had a lot of people that were just, you know, riding it out? It was a comfortable place to work. And the fact is, some of the people, that's true. However, the majority of the people, and let's go with, because I learned that 90% of people want to do the right thing, not 90% of what people want to do the wrong thing. So if you lean into that, right, and you can say, okay, people want to do the right thing, how do I create how do we create an environment that inspires those 90% of people, as opposed to trying to create a fear-based or constraint-based approach, which is trying to design your organization for the 10%. And so that I think is an entrance into this. And I'll tell you that just before we get off this particular slide, the number of bad hires I made was extensive. And I was, for a period of time, I think quite a crazy recruiter, you know, and I learned so much about doing recruitment well. This I found out is used by other organizations, but this is what I learned. Basically, you have values and you have skills. And what I learned to do is say, let's hire for values in a career so that people can have multiple roles and have internal mobility within our business, and not just skills in a job. So if you get too obsessed sometimes about just the skills immediately, it cuts off some other opportunity. However, there is still situations where it is a skills in a job. It's just to be mindful of that difference. And so what we were trying to do here is say, if we just hired for skills and we were not hiring to try and maximize alignment, we just had very bad outcomes. And so I think, what are we trying to get with alignment? We're trying to maximize trust. We're trying to build trust in a business. Now, if you have aligned people, you can build trust. If you have non-alignment, it becomes very difficult. What alignment is not, right? It's not reducing healthy conflict. It's not increasing groupthink, and it's not reducing diversity. That's not what it's about. Alignment is around getting clear about what your values are, what your values constitution, what your value set is, which I'm going to get onto in a moment. It is, and it's what the founders value, right? And in an SME, this is one of the beautiful things. The value system has an origin. One of the reasons why a lot of corporation value systems fail is where do they come from? Are they just made up? Or are they just made up for that particular period? What's beautiful about an SME is that they can be connected back to the origin of the organization. So just to summarize here too, that when we have values, we want to have, a lot of companies have great values, but they're implicit. And as they grow, that implicit, they get lost. So we have to go from a phase of making the implicit values explicit. So to that end, I just want to answer question 1. Do you have values that support decision-making when you're under pressure? So we believe that there's 3 E's to building a great culture. When somebody enters, so that's recruitment. Engagement, you know, catching up with people and finding out how they're going and how the organization is a fit for them, but also are they a fit for the organization, and are they able to tick the box on both capability and skills as well as alignment. And then exit, and this is a really big, you want to actually build an organization where you have good leaves. So a good leave is that a lot of people aren't, you know, they change direction in their life, they change direction in their own aspirations, and so their time with you is no longer. But if you lean into that and actually really give them support, then to go on their journey, then you can actually maximize the number of good leaves. Doesn't mean that you don't get bad leaves. It's just you want to maximize the number of good leaves, because the leave is not necessarily a bad thing. So I think what I want to get onto, and I might pause it there. This is a big part of really underscoring question 1. The next thing is, you know, making a values constitution or making your values explicit. And first of all, I'll talk about, oh, sorry, apologize for the typo there. I just saw that. Anyway, that's the values constitution is, or values code, is a way of differentiating the value, your personal values or team values or any other values, to think about it across your entire business, across your entire SME. And the idea of using a values code or values constitution is you want to understand, what we used to do is get people to sign it on the way in, and then the cultural leader would actually, in the induction, would actually have a meeting with them to really explain what our constitution/code was. So the idea was that you were signing up to this. Now, it doesn't mean that if you don't want to work there, no problem. But, you know, this was, if you sign up to a values constitution, you need far less policies, right? So instead of policies and policing, what you do is you move to a guidance mindset. So a values constitution empowers a more guidance. So it's empowering the person coming in to say, yep, those values align to my values. This is the place I want to work, right? And so what we do is we believe that if you have well-embedded values, now well-embedded values is not just having values, and we will not have time on this to talk about how many things you can do to embed the values within your organization. But if you have embedded values, they are used for decision-making. And this is really, really clear. A team will actually have healthy conflict, and they can actually make a reference to their values constitution to help decision-making. Now, that could be a hard decision about, you know, about your business model. You know, I mean, you're getting that right about, have you got the price right for the customer, and is it in service of your organization? And that is a nuance in business that's a really challenging one at sometimes. And your values can inform that. And your values inform so many different things, right? So the key here is, I'm showing you a value that is written by, this is actually a customer of Adapt by Design. This value is intended to be written and unique to this organization and to be in service of SMS. It's not a value that can be cut and paste and used in 100 different companies. So if people have, you know, integrity is a beautiful value, right? Okay, integrity. But if you just leave it there, right? Well, you could cut and paste that, and that could be in many different places. How do you bring it to life in your organization? That's the key. So first of all, we believe in the concept of owner seats. Then you flesh them out, and you flesh them out by incorporating everybody in the business to actually add the content to the scaffold that the founders have put together. And we believe that this is a really, really powerful way of building a values code that is not bull dust. You know, it's something that's real, used, and embedded. And I think I'll say that to the cows come home. If it's not embedded, don't do it. It'll create more problems than it's worth. Because everything is about, if you're going to build trust, it's about authenticity, right? So if you can't authentically say, I as a leader live that value, and I used to fall off the horse. When you fall off the horse, you put your hand up and you say, right, I fell off the horse. I apologize. I broke that value. But what you don't do is say these values are for somebody else, right? So they only work if they're lived. So anyway, I think I've made that point well and clear. So in question 2, and by the way, that everything that I've introduced so far, it's cumulative and it supports all these questions. So is your team aligned so your business can be adaptable to change, right? So I thought what I would do here is see each of these. did a brief introduction of this last week, but this is the ADAPT team model. This is what we consider based upon others' contribution, different thought leaders in this particular space, plus our own experience. We believe that a team has, if you have a good score in each of these areas, you're going to have a healthy team and a healthy organization, right? So if you look through it, what we know to build the highly effective organization. So if we extrapolate the concept of a team to the organization, because in an SME, I don't know about the people on the call, but let's face it, an SME that's getting greater than 40 or 50 is becoming a sizable SME. And so I'd imagine that many are in organizations less than that. So you can extrapolate the concept these for a team to the full organization. Now, if you look at these things, what we want to do is we want to maximize trust and psychological safety. Now, this point of psychological safety is so important to a culture. If somebody is working in your business on the basis of fear, then that is going to, the research says that people cannot perform at their best if they're in a flight and fight or in that sort of anxious state. Now, there's some positive anxiety, right? About, the challenge of being in a startup, for instance, and those sorts of things. But what we're trying to do is build trust and psychological safety. That's the key, and that's what building a healthy culture is about. However, the point is that all of these other things need to be put in place as well, because if you don't, then people, for instance, effective stewardship, if people don't know how you make decisions or how the leadership team makes a decision or how any distributed decision, who gets the rights to that decision and all those different things, effective stewardship is an essential item to building a healthy culture. So clarity of roles is essential to building a healthy culture. So I want to make it, just share a story about question 2 here and what we did in ADAPT. And I'm using an ADAPT example. So ADAPT by Design, our company, I'm using this example because it's my own experience. We were hit with COVID like everybody else. And we already had an organizational leadership team in place. The leadership team consists of 4 people. We already have a stewardship method or a stewardship framework where we meet once per month in service of delivering on our key objectives. What we decided to do was meet once a week and we used our systems to support decision-making for the impact of COVID-19. Now, because all of the infrastructure was in place and because our values were in place, the impact of decisions was, we were in good shape to actually be able to communicate difficult decisions. So what was one of those difficult decisions? We decided to reduce everybody's salary by 2.75. So reduce it by 25%. Unfortunately, we do not qualify for JobKeeper because last year our salary was lower than this year. So, our revenue is lower than this year. However, we made it clear. We said, okay, for the next 3 months, everyone's going on 0.75, right? We made the decision. We then had a team meeting to discuss the decision. And this engagement survey that you're looking at was done after that decision. So another part that I can bring to play here is that if you can build data, cultural data in service of of healthy culture, you're bringing evidence to the table, right? And if you're data-driven, I'm very data-driven, but data-driven is the way to be if you want to help people understand decisions, right? And understand, help people make good decisions. Anyway, so cultural, they're having data systems for culture is a very good idea if you're trying to build healthy culture. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause there just to see if we've created any, is there any questions?
Bill, we've got a question from Angela Doyle, my colleague at the Advanced Manufacturing Growth Centre. Ange, do you want to ask your question? Unmute yourself and show yourself if you want.
Hopefully I'm turning up. I can't see myself, but anyway.
There you go, we can hear you.
Oh, good. Hi, Bill. Thanks for your workshop. My question is, there are companies at the moment who are, here we go, who are in a bit of a hiatus. They're sort of hanging around, wondering what to do and how to build sales and, you know, all those sorts of things. But it's also an opportunity for them to visit their culture, discuss that with their staff, and then perhaps articulate more clearly what the business culture is ready for the new normal. Any thoughts on or suggestions on how companies should go about that?
Yeah, so I'm going to give you these slides, but I can perhaps also distribute some other resources to help. The key there is that, first of all, the leader or leaders code their values. So if each person does their own personal values, then run an exercise to find the intersection of the personal values to then elaborate the scaffold for the values for the organization, then run some highly interactive workshops with the team to add content to those value seeds, as we call them. So it begins with the founder's personal values, driving toward value seeds, which they can then get elaborated by the whole team. And so the first part to, you know, really getting on top of a culture is being clear to, well, what is it that we value? And so that would be my recommendation. And we can supply some resources after this to help with that. Okay, so with this one, what is your exposure to key people risk? I think this question, well, let me begin with a story. I think it was early 2000s. The other major owner of Acquire to myself was 10 years older than me. And the existing sort of thinking for key people risk was that you would take out key people risk insurance. And the premiums were insane. I think the premiums were like, I don't know, $40,000, $50,000 a year for Andy. And the strange thing was that Andy wasn't, as far as Acquire was concerned, his contribution wasn't that great. He was doing it, it's hard to explain, but the point here is that this cost to the business was ridiculous and it didn't solve the problem. So for myself, given my roles in the business as the entrepreneurial leader of the business, if I fell over, because at that stage I didn't have much role clarity, it would have been very, very difficult for everybody else to say, okay, well, how do we go out and recruit somebody else to do that role, that role, that role? So we started to realize that the idea of having insurance to cover the cost of a salary was money that we were throwing away. And it made so much more sense for us to start to think about, well, how do we de-risk our business associated with founder knowledge and or people that actually, you know, whether they're software engineers or software architects or whatever roles they had in the business where they had a lot of intellectual property. How do we actually mitigate that risk? And it's where we started to understand more and more and more about the concept of role clarity and the separation of role from soul. And I think this directly relates to the building of healthy culture, and I'll explain that more. But let's just move on, and I'll just bear with me. So the first thing that we believe that there's two primary things around this key people risk issue was that we didn't want to be surprised when people left our organization. So we wanted to be able to really lean into, well, what's everybody motivated by? Now, I spoke about this last week, but the reason why I came to this was because I noticed that people would often advertise jobs and they would only talk about finance. They'd only talk about the financial component. And I thought, and I had a person come to me and said, I'm going to leave the business. I've got a better job because they're going to pay me $90,000 a year more because it's a boom situation. And I thought, well, it's a real shame. This guy is a person that we definitely want to be a leader of tomorrow. Anyway, I thought it was gone. But this is where we started to realize that people don't necessarily have a method for tracking what truly motivates them. And we started to realize that the professional fit, personal fit, cultural fit had as much impact on people's happiness in work as the financial fit. So at the time, we just started building this up and realized that there was 7 primary motivations for why people come to work. And what we did was we would continuously say, okay, if you value personal fit at 26, right, and we're delivering on 15, we've got work to do, right? So this is and it was clear. So we've got a data-driven way of determining how each person in the business is, what we have to do to support their alignment to our business in this way. And by tracking their motivations, we reduced risk of somebody that was holding a lot of knowledge and was key to the business, leaving us being surprised. We mitigated that risk a lot. So in actual fact, it came down to being a very rare event where we would have somebody that was leaving the business and going to surprise us. So this idea of leading into the motivations of each person, and if you think about this is very temporal. So you find that people that are, 35, mortgage, kids, their financial demand is greater than somebody that's 55, right? And so these motivations change, but they also change because of life events, right? So we found out that this data became incredibly powerful to informing our strategy, because also people would start to tell us, well, we value training and you don't train us well enough. So we actually innovated a method of training people where we set up a $2,000 a year account for every person in the business, right? Now, I appreciate that we were becoming quite a sophisticated business at the time we did that. But what it meant was that everybody had their own account to do their own personal development, as opposed to having to go to a manager. So now let's connect this to Dan Pink's book on Drive. He said that, autonomy is a big motivation. What people want autonomy. So if you can say, okay, we're setting up a training system right? We know people want training. In this particular example, this person didn't want training. You know, it's 0 out of 5. It's not 5 is not, it's not really that important to them. So the concept is that it can start to inform how you innovate your business internally in service of, because we know that our employees are the ones that are actually develop the product and deliver the product or sell the product or whatever. So that's the key there. So the second part to this key people risk, which I started talking about, was this role clarity and handover, right? So if you've got, if you don't have role clarity, how do you hand it over? And this picture, I think, you know, is the typical picture for a founder. Usually a founder is going to be doing work in all zones of the business. So for instance, you know, a typical day might be, I've got to send that proposal to John at customer A, do that delivery work for customer B, do the bank reconciliation, do a cash flow assessment, interview Mary for the position, have a meeting with Freddie, isn't happy. You know, this is a typical day, but this is, if you don't get clear about what roles you're doing in this, then it becomes very, very difficult to actually have the succession of knowledge for people like founders in SMEs. So role clarity is key. Now, once you've got once you've got role clarity, then you can treat roles like batons and you can hand them over to other people. And then you can have a handover process. And that, what I learned, this is the way that I was able to build a business where ultimately I handed over 100% of the business and the business continued to run with others. So, but this is, I think, another area of that creates a healthy culture, because you don't, instead of people trying to hang on to positions and hang on to knowledge and use that as power, it actually creates a culture of in service of the system and in service of the company, I've got to empower others.